welcome to this episode of Insight Check. Welcome. It is Bardic Quest Day once again here in the Bardic Quest Stronghold, and I hope you're very, very excited for the episode that is due out in but a few hours' time. I know I certainly am, and certainly looking forward to seeing your reactions to it, which is always a delight. Apologies for my tardiness coming live today, for those that are tuning in live. I was deep in preparation for our recording session this weekend, which is due to be, hopefully, if all goes well, the finale for Campaign 1. We're putting that in front of cameras on Sunday afternoon, Sunday morning / afternoon. Now, of course, I can't guarantee that it will be the finale, as I have said to the cast. Anything can happen in D&D, as we know, but my anticipation is that it likely will be. So, I was just stuck and absorbed in in the preparation for that and preparing final encounters and things. Which is very exciting indeed. So, coming up today on Insight Check. Actually, no. Before I get to that, there's a few other housekeeping bits. So, next week, the episode of Insight Check, just as a heads up, I haven't decided which way round this is going to work, but it's either going to be pre-recorded or it will be released a day early. Because essentially it is Valentine's Day on Friday. Both my partner and I work from home on Fridays, so that very much will be our opportunity to celebrate Valentine's together at Friday lunchtime before the kids arrive back from school, of course. So we are gonna take that opportunity where we can to celebrate. So so it will be either pre-recorded, as I say, or it will be a day early. So keep your eyes peeled for notifications as it relates to that, because I haven't yet decided which way round it's going to be. But just as a heads up that things might be a little bit different next week. Also, I have just opened up a suggestion box post, as I like to do. I've done it on Patreon. I still need to put it out on the YouTube membership site. Essentially, submit your questions box, because as of course we're doing these Insight Check episodes weekly now. It's we're putting out more content essentially for you wonderful patrons and YouTube members, and doing that more regularly. And essentially doing multiple segments in a single week rather than one. It does mean that we are getting through questions rather quickly. So if you did want to submit any questions, either kind of for the DM Q&A style videos or segments, or indeed if you wanted to submit some as it relates to the upcoming Campaign 2, which will be launching in a few months' time, possibly, maybe even less than that. We will see. But if you have any questions, do submit those as well. So today, we're going to be going through kind of this week in D&D, a sneak peek at the monster manual, because some of us have got early access to it because we're master tier subscribers to D&D Beyond, and also had it on pre-order. So for those that haven't got it on pre-order or don't have access to it yet, I'll give you a little bit of a glimpse as to what you can expect. When you look at it. We'll be taking a look as well specifically at monsters that you guys have suggested to take a look at, because we don't have time to go through the entire monster manual, of course. So we'll be doing that. And also we're going to be going through some questions that you guys have submitted for the DM Q&A. And then we'll wrap things up today with another roleplay tips segment on how to roleplay a orc as per the lore provided in the 2024 Player's Handbook. So, let's get into this week in D&D. So, where's my D&D Beyond window gone? That should be there. Where have you gone, D&D Beyond window? If you'll just bear with me. Oh, the joys of live streaming when things go terribly, terribly wrong. Let me have a look. Where are you? If you'll excuse me for button. Oh, that looks like that is it. Let's expand that out. Here we are. All right. So this week, many of us, those of us who are master tier subscribers on D&D Beyond, and have also pre-ordered the Monster Manual, and now have access to it. It came out on Tuesday of this week, and I must admit, I don't necessarily take much joy in flicking through a website to get all of my D&D information. I'm much more of a sit with a physical book and have a look through. I don't get the same sort of enjoyment, and it doesn't go in the same way for me. So I've only had a kind of leisurely look through, very, very top level look through of the Monster Manual this week, because I'm kind of saving my physical copy coming through. I'm just waiting to be able to get hold of a alt cover, because I like the alt covers for the new core rules. Just waiting for that to become available so I can get that sent through the post. But I have had a little bit of a skim, as I say, and kind of wanted to go through. As I say, I put out a post for some suggestions as to monsters to look at, so you can kind of get an idea as to what you can expect from the Monster Manual here. Oh, I should probably grab the old one as well so we can do some comparisons. Okay. Let me move my dice out of the way. As I say, I was prepping for a D&D session today. So, let's see. So, Becky Hill, the glorious Becky Hill, asked for us to take a look at hags, because she's being very meta about this whole thing. And she wants to, as we know, for those that have been following the campaign, our party of heroes are looking likely to face a hag in the finale, if all goes to plan, of course. And so she wants to get a glimpse as to whether or not they're going to have an easier time of it, because it's 2014 rules that we're using versus the 2024. So going to give you a bit of a look at hag. So we'll take a look first of all at the green hag and the night hag. So you will see, whereas in the 2014 Monster Manual, everything was grouped together, kind of by category and then by monster. They've changed it up now, so there isn't a hags section. There is simply the green hag, which you'd look up in G as opposed to under H, and likewise the night hag will be an N for night hag rather than H for hags. So just taking a look at the green hag here. So you'll notice a few things, which is pretty much universal across all of the monsters. So each monster now has a bit of a tagline. So green hag is a foul witch of the wicked wild. Then underneath there's kind of a little bit of a few tags for where you'd normally find a green hag: forest, hill, and swamp. And also the treasure section, which gives you a kind of general idea as to what sort of types of treasure a creature will carry with it. And those are kind of broken down. Essentially, this dictates what sorts of roll tables you're going to be rolling on if you're looking at giving magic items as part of that creature, as per the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. Now, the green hag here, they kind of give you a little bit of a breakdown as to the lore here. I haven't done a direct comparison of lore with the monsters yet, although I'm sure we'll come back to my kind of views on what I have seen from the lore with the Monster Manual shortly. So I couldn't tell you if anything's changed here specifically with the lore around the green hag. But it is there. And they've also provided, and this is a nice touch that I like, with the monster manual, is not for all monsters, but for most monsters, there's usually a roll table for a DM to roll on, to try and give you a little bit of food for thought and maybe some hooks and inspiration for how to run the monsters. Normally on a narrative level rather than on a mechanical level. So in this case, this is a green hag. 3. A green hag might trade its knowledge for a favour to be redeemed when the hag wishes. Ooh, a devil's bargain, if you will. So that's a nice little touch that a lot of the monsters have. Now, let's actually have a look here at the stat block. Now, I've not got the 2014 one on screen at the moment, but this will give you a view as to what you can expect. I will do some comparisons. So it's medium fey, neutral evil, so that hasn't changed. Armor class 17 hasn't changed. Initiative value was not as clear on the old stat blocks, but I believe it's based on your dex score, so that hasn't changed. That's +1. Hit points haven't changed. They have a speed of 30 feet, but they've now also been given a swim speed. Interesting. That didn't exist in the 2014 version, just a standard speed. In terms of stats, they don't appear to have changed at all. So the stats are as they would be. Skills. Arcana has been boosted to a +5 from +3. Deception is +4, Perception is +4, Stealth is +3. So the skills haven't changed aside from Arcana, which has been given an extra +2 boost from where it was. Senses, Dark Vision up to 60 feet, a passive perception of 14. That remains the same. Languages, Common, Elvish, and Sylvan. Now, these have changed from Common, Draconic, and Sylvan. So they've decided that Draconic is... I know that Draconic has been classified as an uncommon language, as I understand it. So perhaps they've swapped it out for one of the more common languages. And of course, as with all the monsters, the challenge rating remains the same. They are still amphibious. They have innate spell casting. So let's see if the spells have changed. So at will, you have dancing lights. That's still there. Minor illusion in the old one. That's still there. Vicious mockery is gone. However, they do now have more spells at their disposal. Disguise Self is there, where it wasn't before, and Invisibility is there where it wasn't before. And Ray of Sickness is a new one as well. So they've really upped the output of the magic of Green Hags, which I think was probably needed. The claw attack remains there. It's +6 to hit still, reach of 5 feet. It used to do 13 points of damage, but it was just slashing damage. Now it is a total of 8 slashing damage, and then 3 poison damage if you're taking the average. So it's been nerfed ever so slightly, but actually there is the potential for it to hit higher, of course, because the additional dice from the poison damage. So, although the slashing damage used to be 2d8 +4, now it's 1d8 +4. Okay, so it has been reduced ever so slightly, not massively, but slightly. And the illusionary appearance feature has now gone. Then there's the coven magic side of things, which the spells have been dramatically reduced in number for one, with the coven magic compared to what it was before. I won't go into the specifics because it's quite a significant difference, but ultimately they've been reduced in number and in power in terms of the number of spells that the Green Hag has available, whilst in 30 feet of at least 2 other hags. So that is the hag, the green hag at least. Let's take a quick look now at the night hag, because Becky wanted to take a look at that as well. Let's see here. The night hag. Night hag. So, no roll table for this one. They are a planar. They have a planar habitat, particularly the lower planes, which are the planes linked to evil, and they also have arcana-based treasure. Again, I haven't done a comparison of the lore, but I can take a look at the stat block here. So, medium fiend, neutral evil, that remains the same. Armor class 17, initiative +5, which looks to be a boost. They've made them quicker, at least on initiative anyway. Hit points remains the same. Speed of 30 feet remains the same. Skills, deception was +7. It's been reduced to plus. Oh, actually no. Let me do ability scores first. Strength 18, Dex 15, Con 16, Int 16, Wiz 14, Charisma 16. So they've remained the same. Skills, however, deception has been reduced from +7 to +6. Insight has been reduced from +5 to +6. Perception has been reduced from +6 to +5. And stealth has been reduced from +6 to +5. Interesting. Resistances. They only have resistance to cold and fire damage. Not resistances to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical weapons that aren't silvered. Now, I believe I read somewhere, and I can't remember where, that the silvered thing is gonna go, generally, which we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to lycanthropes. I was going to say lycanthropes, but that's not right. So, again, immunities to being charmed, that remains. Dark vision remains the same. Passive perception has been reduced slightly, down from 16 to 15. Languages are abyssal, common, infernal, and primordial. That remains the same. And, of course, CR rating remains the same. So, cover magic we've already touched on. The same changes apply. The magic resistance. Magic resistance. Oh, yep, that's there. That's still the same. The soul bag was something that I believe... Yeah, I can't see it in the old stat block here. Yeah, so the soul bag is something that is referred to in the stat block previously in the old version, but isn't directly referenced, so there wasn't a section on the soul bag. That now is very clearly there. Multi-attack, 2 claw attacks. The claw attack, let's take a look at that. So that has actually been buffed a little bit. So it was a +6 to hit, now it's +7. With a reach of 5 feet, that remains the same. Now the damage also remains the same, 2d8 +4 slashing damage, but it has been, they are more likely to hit by an increase of 1, which is interesting. Now, they did have a feature. I'm just trying to do it in the same order here. Actually, let's look at Nightmare Haunting. So this looks to be mostly the same, from what I could tell. It looks to be mostly the same. It's been worded differently to reference the dream spell, because essentially what the Night Hag could do is it would visit people in their dreams. And in visiting people in their dreams, it would seek to reduce their hit point maximum. But it didn't directly reference the dream spell. But it may as well have done, because it essentially worked the same way as the dream spell. So they've just tidied up the actual reference of it in a way, but essentially it functions the same way. Nothing's really changed other than the wording of it. Now spells. What spells? I think these look to be mostly the same. So Detect Magic and Magic Missile were all in the previous stat block. Etherealness was kind of in the stat block, and again, this is one of those quality of life improvements that they've made. It actually exists still in the stat block, but rather than as a feature and an action, it is just as a separate spell, which and so some would say is an improvement. Others would say, well, actually, now I have to go look up the Etherealness spell rather than it just being in the stat block. So it depends on which side of the field you stand there. Then in terms of the more powerful spells, Plane Shift remains, Ray of Enfeeblement has gone, and Sleep has gone. Now that's an interesting choice, because you would think that Sleep would be something that a Night Hag would definitely want to have. But they've got rid of it for some reason. With the Nightmare Haunting, it seems bizarre that they got rid of it, but okay. And Ray of Enfeeblement has gone. I like Ray of Enfeeblement, but they've replaced it with Phantasmal Killer, which is arguably a more effective spell, in combat at least, so we will see. And then they do have the shape-shifting ability, which is similar essentially to their change shape ability. Again, functions mostly the same. So the Hag, for the most part, not really much change, just a couple of changes of spells, and stats have been increased or decreased by about 1 point each, which is interesting to see. So let's have a look at what we want to have a look at next. Oh, dragons. I don't know how many of these I'll take a look at, but let's take a look at a few. White dragon, because I've ran a few adult white dragons. So let's take a look at the adult white dragon. So the adult white dragon, in fact, let me have a look. So white dragons generally, Habitat Arctic, Arcana Treasure, of course. I can't see a roll table here for white dragons, which is a shame. However, if you are in possession of Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, then you will already have a ton of roll tables, so that's not too bad, provided you possess those. So an adult white dragon, let me take a look and see how things have changed. I probably won't be able to remember the specific stats. The abilities I might, though. Now, they've done a lot of work with dragons. A lot of work indeed, because they wanted to make them more potent, and I think it was necessary. Because dragons can get, they can get battered quite easily with a well-prepared party, and particularly given that dragons are so iconic and generally quite easy to suss out, in so much as a white dragon is resistant to cold, a green dragon is resistant to poison, and also a white dragon deals cold, and a green dragon deals poison damage. So it's very, very easy to prepare for a dragon encounter if you know that it's coming. So it'll be interesting to see how they've changed things here. So, still huge, still chaotic evil, still armor class 18, initiative of plus 10, which is a big improvement. Big improvement. Very nice. Very nice. They also, I don't know if you've noticed this, by the way, but they also give a kind of average initiative score, which I think is really nice if you just want to not have to roll dice. I mean, I use a VTT, so it's just a click of a button, and no harder than taking average. So I'll probably roll randomly, but that is a nice quality of life thing for if you're running a physical table. So if I'm running at home for like my home game in person, I'll probably use the average. Anyway, so hit points 200, that remains the same. Speeds, they all remain the same. So 40-foot base speed, burrow speed of 30, fly speed of 80, swim speed of 40. In terms of stats, we got 22, 10, 22, 8, 12, and 12. So they have remained the same. Let me zoom in a little bit on these for you. Skills. Oh, actually, let me have a look at the saving throws. I think they'll probably remain the same, actually. Oh, no, the Constitution save has been massively nerfed. Whereas it was a +11 to a con save, it's now +6. Interesting. The wisdom save remains the same, and the charisma save has also been nerfed. Interesting. I don't want my saves. I don't. Come on, it's an adult dragon. Give me at least give me a +11 con save. Shucks. So perception +11, stealth +5, that remains the same. Immunities to cold, that remains the same. Senses, blind sight 60 feet, dark vision 120 feet, passive perception 21, that remains the same. Languages remain the same. Challenge rating remains the same. The ice walk feature that can move across icy surfaces without needing an ability check and difficult terrain basically is null and void. That remains the same. Legendary resistances. 3 a day or 4 in the lair. So that's something that they've done now. With the lair stuff has now been very much put into the stat block by basically the buff is you get more legendary resistances and more legendary actions when you're in your lair, rather than the lair action stuff, which I don't know how I feel about, to be honest. I quite like lair actions as a mechanic, but they can be a pain for some people to manage. I think if it were me running at my own table, what I'd probably do is ignore the boosts to the stat block and just replace it with lair actions instead. Because I like lair actions and I like the kind of environment getting involved a little bit more. And actually, I think more creatures could do with lair actions myself than less. So, yeah, that's probably what I will do. But the good thing about having the 2014 books and the 2024 books is that you can kind of cherry pick a little bit more as to which version of certain things you want to use. To be perfectly honest, and I don't think many of the changes will dramatically unbalance the game. So yeah, I'll probably keep lair actions, but obviously drop the extra stuff you get for being in the lair. Anyway, multi-attack, 3 rend attacks. So obviously a lot of the attacks now have changed. Rather than there being a claw and a tail attack, they've just been replaced by a rend attack, which makes sense because there's not all that much difference between the two. So they have it's still +11 to hit, and your average damage is still pretty much the same if you compare it to the claw attack instead of the tail attack. The tail attack was slightly stronger with an average of 15 damage, but the claw was 13 still. But also the damage type has changed to include slashing damage as well as the cold damage. So that will have an impact on resistances and things like that as well, which is nice. Then the cold breath. Let's see if this has changed. So Constitution saving throw of a DC 19 for a 60-foot cone. That remains the same. If they fail, they take 12d8 cold damage, which remains the same, and success is half damage. So that's the same. But the interesting bit is now where the legendary actions come in, because these have been massively overhauled. So again, legendary actions take place after an individual person's turn. That is not another creature's turn, so not after the dragon's turn, to take an additional action, basically. So they get 3 by standard or 4 if they're in their lair. And all of these are brand new, at least in terms of them being legendary actions. So let's address the Frightful Presence first of all, because that one did exist in the previous stat block, but it wasn't a legendary action. It was a standard action. I actually prefer them as legendary actions. I think they make more sense, because then it doesn't matter where the dragon comes in the initiative for somebody to potentially be terrified. So it makes sense narratively, I think, that after the first person's go, the dragon's going to trigger their Frightful Presence, and just to see if people are terrified. So basically they cast the Fear spell. So again, we're seeing that instance where instead of explaining a feature that exists in the spell, they just reference the spell. So they cast that, requiring no material components. That does massively reduce the distance, because it was 120 feet for Frightful Presence. and now it's reduced to 30 feet, which I actually think is not a good move, personally. I don't know how I feel about that, to be honest with you, as a hot take. But it requires no material components, and using the charisma spellcasting ability of a DC 14, which actually remains the same. Let's see, DC 14, and it will be a wisdom saving throw. So functionally, in terms of the dice, that all remains the same. The dragon can't take this action again until the start of its next turn. But also the other thing that I do like about it, which kind of balances out the range, I guess, is that if you save against the Frightful Presence in 2014, you're immune then to the fear for 24 hours. That's not the case with this. That is not the case with the fear spell. So that's good. Then we have Detect has gone, thank goodness, because that was kind of pointless. The wing attack has gone, and the tail attack has gone. They've been replaced by Pounce, which allows the dragon to move up to half its speed, which I think is great, and make a rend attack. So that kind of replaces the wing attack in many ways, and the tail attack, because the wing attack allows the dragon to move at half their speed, so that's good. And then we have Freezing Burst, which is a 30-foot sphere centered on the point the dragon can see within 120 feet. So I guess we get the 120 feet range with that instead of the Frightful Presence, which is fair enough. On a point that the dragon can see, on a failure, it's 2d6 cold damage, and the target's speed is 0 until the end of the target's next turn. Oh! And whether or not they succeed or fail, the dragon can't take the action again until the start of its next turn. Oh, that feels so terrifying. Like, if you're trying to, if you're being battered by the dragon and you're just trying to run away, like, that thing is gonna catch up with you. And that is pretty terrifying. Like, the idea of them being like a hunter in this instance is really quite cool. And it says in the lore here, often the mightiest of predators in those lands. When they spot something moving on the ice, they might swoop down to feed or extort food and offerings from sapient creatures. Yeah, and that very much feels like they've captured that just with that Freezing Burst ability. Like, you imagine you do the Freezing Burst, like, you got up close to the dragon, you regret that decision, it looks like you're thinking of running away, like, because you're blooded or whatever. They just Freezing Burst you, and then focus in and go for a pounce on the next one. Yikes, that's terrifying. I want to do the Green Dragon as well, because the Green Dragon seemed kind of fun. My goodness, we're going long on this segment. I will try and speed things up a little. Green Dragon, where are you? Let's take a look at the adult Green Dragon as well, because I like the adult Green Dragon. Forest, they are dragons of deceit and derision, and they tend to carry Arcana-based treasure. So let's take a look at the adult one. So, adult Green Dragon. Let me quickly look this up in the old monster manual. Adult Green. Alright, so let's see. Huge still, Lawful Evil, of course. Armor class 19. Initiative plus 11. Again, very nice. Nice boost. Hit points 207, that remains the same. Speeds remain the same. Scores remain the same. Oh, Charisma's been given a +1 boost on the actual score to give it a +1 boost on the modifier. So they're more charismatic than they were before. In terms of saves, Dex is the same. The Connor's got a nerf again. Wisdom save remains the same. Charisma has got a nerf again. Not liking these nerfs to the dragon, man. Not liking it. But let's see. Skills. Deception has been given a +1 boost. Insight is gone. Perception remains the same. Persuasion has been given a +1 boost, and stealth remains the same. Immunities to poison and being poisoned. Senses remain the same. Languages remain the same. CR remains the same. They're still amphibious. And legendary resistances, again, 3 per day, or 4 if they're in their lair. Now, in terms of actions, the multi-attack action gives them 3 rend attacks, which they can replace one of them with the Mind Spike spell. A lot of dragons, though not all of them, the white dragon clearly was not one of them, but a lot of dragons have been having spellcasting put into their stat block by default, which I really like. Before, dragons as spellcasters was a variant, but to me, dragons should always be spellcasters on some level if they have the intelligence to do so. So they can replace. They get 3 rend attacks, or they can replace one with the Mind Spike spell, which is pretty cool. It basically does psychic damage and allows the dragon to know exactly where you are, even if you're invisible. Isn't that cool? So the rend attack, if you're replacing it with the others, so it's still going to be a +11 to hit, which is great. And an average of 15 points of damage, which is somewhere between the claw and bite attacks. Oh, and the tail attack. So it's kind of equivalent to the tail attack. Oh no, hang on, 15 plus... Oh, it's more damage. Because they broke out the damage types. I forgot about the poison damage. So actually, it's a stronger attack than all of them. Oh no, the bite was poison. Okay. Okay, so it's a little bit weaker than the bite, but somewhere in the middle between the others, which is fair enough because they're combining all of the attacks, so I don't see that as being too much of a problem. Poison Breath, 60-foot cone, that remains the same. DC 18, that remains the same. 56 points of poison damage, and half on a success, so that remains the same. Now, the spellcasting is new, so they can cast Detect Magic and Mind Spike, and Aegeus, or Aegeus. I say Geas. Yeah, so Geas is pretty cool and kind of feeds into the manipulation that we talked about of dragons with the little tagline. They are very manipulative, very wily, and very smart. The Geas is a great spell to give them because basically it says you need to do as you're told. If you don't do as you're told, then... well, you're going to take 5d10 points of psychic damage if it acts outside of the caster's request, which is pretty nice. So, legendary actions then. Much like the other ones from the White Dragon, these have been dramatically changed. Detect is gone, Tail Attack is gone, and Wing Attack is gone. So, this one doesn't have Frightful Presence, which is interesting. Because I feel like all dragons should have Frightful Presence, but okay. So you can do Mind Invasion, which is using the Mind Spike spell again. You get to do that every turn. Ouch. You get the Pounce attack, which seems to be standard from some of the dragons, to move up to half its speed and make 1 rend attack. And then this new feature, which is a Noxious Miasma, which I think kind of replaces one of the lair actions for the green dragon, if I remember rightly. There is like a fog one, if I recall. But it's a Constitution saving throw, DC 17. Each creature within a 20-foot radius sphere takes 2d6 poison damage and a -2 penalty to AC until the end of its next turn. Woo! Nasty. So I kind of like... I'm generally... Again, I haven't gone through every stat block, but I'm generally overall quite liking the changes to the dragons. They feel more thematic. Even if certain things have been nerfed, they feel more thematic. And to be perfectly honest with you, if you said to me, we can make your monsters feel more unique with each stat block, but the cost is going to be a reduction in certain stats, then I would probably take the stat reduction for the thematic and interesting kind of unique qualities of the creature. If I'm honest with you, like I'd probably take that. So I'm generally happy. Again, I like my lair actions. That's probably my only real issue. I quite like my lair actions, and I'd probably bring those back, replacing the additional lair action, legendary action, and additional resistance. I would probably replace that with just lair actions myself personally. But aside from that, generally, I'm quite happy with these changes. So quickly taking a look, I'm going to go through these next ones a bit quicker. So I think it was Nigel wanted to take a look at wolves, just to see if they've dramatically changed. They haven't changed much. I've had a look at this stat block already. They essentially remain mostly the same. The main difference now, though, is the bite attack. And you see this a lot with a lot of the stat blocks. So when you first look at it, you're like, okay, well this is exactly the same. But, and I'm going to fact check myself here because I don't want to get this wrong. What I noticed, and I want to just double check that I was right, just seeing this off the top of my head rather than yeah, I was. So what you'll notice is now, if the bite attack hits you, you are prone. Whereas before, if it hit you, that would be enough to then trigger a saving throw. And if you pass that, then you wouldn't be prone, and if you failed it, you would. Whereas now, if you get bitten by a wolf, they are knocking you prone. And I think I like it, actually, as a Dungeon Master. It's going to make the combats feel much more dynamic, because every time a wolf hits you, you're going to have to be dealing with the prone condition, which is going to slow you down. It's going to make you easier to hit. But I mean, also the wolves themselves, they still have pack tactics. So they're going to be rolling with advantage if they're close enough, and then try and pin you down. And then, like, at that point, like, if you get like ganged up on by a bunch of wolves, like, you're going to be prone for probably that entire fight, certainly at low levels anyway. So I really like it. I feel like it's going to really bring a dynamism to a lot of the combats from just basic creatures. You want to have a look at the spider as well, I believe, Nigel. So let's take a look here. Now, I didn't actually have a good look at this one to see if things have dramatically changed. This is the tiny version of the spider. Oh, do you know? So, no, not much. Why do we actually have a look at the giant spider? I think that's probably going to be a better one to look at. Giant spider. Where are you, giant spider? There you are. Let's take a look. So, giant spider, still a large beast. Let's see. Giant spider. This is great viewing whilst I flick through the old monster manual. Apologies. Okay, so this stat block looks a lot smaller, but that could just be the way it's presented on the page. So AC 14, that remains the same. Initiative +3, that's the same. Hit point 26. You'll find that most of the changes to the low level creatures, they're going to be very minimal. Because actually the simpler the creature, the less they need to have change things. But we'll see here. So strength 14, 16, 12 to 11 and 4, that remains the same. Skills, they've been given a boost to perception now. They're +4 on perception. Stealth remains the same. They don't have blind sight anymore, but their dark vision remains, and their passive perception has been boosted to 14 up from 10. Challenge rating remains the same. So spider climb is there. Web walker. Spider ignores movement restriction, and it knows the location of any other creature in contact with the same web. Now they've added that a little tidbit here, which I think makes sense narratively. Like, it just knows where they are. Which I guess what they've kind of done is kind of replaced blind sight with that, I guess. Which I think makes more sense. Spider climb, yeah, we know that, we've done that. No, hang on. No, you see, I say that they've added that tidbit, but they haven't. They've just it was a WebSense feature, and then they've built it into WebWalker to keep the features smaller. I got very excited then for a minute, and then realised no. So the bite attack has been again that same thing that we saw with the wolf, where you would have been bitten, been hit, taken the piercing damage, and then saved against the poison damage. The poison damage is now automatic. But interestingly, they've got rid of the feature that basically makes you stable rather than killing you if you hit 0 hit points. Which is a shame. I kind of quite liked that because it felt like a Shelob thing. So it's a shame that that's gone. But I mean, you could always add that in as a DM if you really wanted to, if you missed that. Because it's not going to massively unbalance the game, I don't think. It's more of a narrative thing in some respects, although not entirely. And then we have the web attack, which is now a saving throw rather than an attack. But again, they've done that because you had to hit with the web, and then they could use an action to break free every turn. Whereas now it's just one saving throw, and then they have the restrained condition until the web is destroyed. But of course, by being restrained, they can still attack the web. They're just going to be doing so with disadvantage. So that'd kind of be the same as using an action, I suppose. So they've kind of simplified it in that way. All right. Let's have a quick look at lycanthropes, because there is something I do want to call out directly, which I did briefly mention. So werewolves. Then I really must move on because this segment's taken longer than I thought. Lycanthropes. Okay, so a few things. They are now monstrosities. They are not humanoids, which is going to have a massive impact on things, because now things like hold person are not going to work on this, and anything that targets specifically humanoids will no longer work on a werewolf, which is great. Armor class has increased to 15. Hit points have increased to 71. Speed has remained the same. Scores, strength has increased from 15 to 16. Dex has increased from 13 to 14. Con remains the same. Int remains the same. Wisdom remains the same. Charisma remains the same. Saving throws. Obviously, Dex and Con. Dex has been increased. Hang on. The strength modifier. There we go. The strength modifier and the Dex modifiers for both saves and general ability checks have both increased by +1 because of those changes. They also now come equipped with a bow as standard, which is interesting. Rather than a spear, which I think makes more sense because rage attacks with a werewolf makes sense. They do now. This is one of my bugbears. You'll notice there is no talk of any immunities here whatsoever. And I think I read somewhere the silvered thing has gone, and it didn't bother me so much with some of the other creatures, but I kind of feel like you gotta have it with your lycanthropes. Like, it is so fundamental to the lore. Like, it's so fundamental to the lore of werewolves. Like, sure, if you want to take it out the game generally, fine. But it's a werewolf, man. Everybody knows werewolves suck when it comes to silver. Like, I just... Why? It just didn't seem to me. I mean, they've tried to balance it out, I guess, with all of these buffs and stuff. But it's kind of like the opposite of with, like, what I was saying with the dragon. The silver thing makes the werewolf feel, or the lycanthrope feel, unique. And you've kind of taken that away and given me buffs. I'd rather you didn't give me the buffs and kept the immunity. Because because that's a narrative thing, and it's one of those things where you've got a bit of a quest hook. There's a werewolf hunting you down. Nobody's got any silvered weapons. Now you need to go on a quest to get some silvered weapons. That's been taken away now. And that, to me, when you start taking away things that give you a narrative reason to go on a side quest, to me, you're damaging the game as a whole. For me personally. Your mileage may vary. So, the other thing that I did want to call out, they've got pack tactics now, like wolves, which is, again, makes sense. I won't go into too much on the attacks. There's one of the main things, though, that I do want to call out now, as well, which I don't know how I feel, to be honest. But all lycanthropes now, if you get hit by the attack, you do then have to make a Constitution saving throw, and if you fail, you become cursed with lycanthropy, or lycanthropy. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't like the lycanthropy rules in the 2014 Monster Manual, because they felt far too strong. Like, from a mechanical level, you fight with a werewolf, you may as well be going, come on, dude, bite me, bite me, bite me, bite me. Because you get the buffs that you get from being a werewolf were so good with not a single drawback, at least mechanically. So I didn't like how they did it then. I don't know if I like this better, if I'm honest. So basically what happens is, if you get cursed with lycanthropy, if you die... No, well, not if you die. If you drop to 0 hit points. So it's not even if you're killed. If you drop to 0 hit points, you become a werewolf, but the DM controls you. I don't know how I feel about that. On one hand, I like it because being bitten by a werewolf is something you definitely don't want now. Whereas before, as I was just saying, you might want to. This you don't want that. Because dropping to 0 hit points means your character's gone, essentially. So it really raises the stakes, and that I like. That I really like. But it also takes away the fantasy of, I've been bitten by a werewolf, I get to be a werewolf now. And they haven't provided, as far as I can see, any rules for a werewolf-based PC. And I kind of feel like that's another thing that is another fantasy around werewolves that I think the game is lessened for not having. Because we all know the players that want to demonstrate and play around with and, you know, experiment with the idea of being a lycanthrope. It kind of takes that option away. But then equally, the option that was in the 2014 Monster Manual was pretty much unusable because it completely unbalanced the game for in favor of the player characters, which, you know, 2014 does not need stronger player characters. So I feel mixed about this. I do feel mixed. It makes werewolves quite terrifying, which they should be. But equally, they're not immune to silver anymore. Like, if you gave them the immunity to silver, like, these guys would be so terrifying, particularly at low levels. But even at higher levels then, for a CR3 monster, they could be quite scary. But I suppose that's the point. The CR3 doesn't quite match up the difficulty levels, I guess. Yeah, I don't really know how to feel about this one, but I'd be interested to know your thoughts on that, because it's a very, very interesting change. And yeah, so let me know how you feel about it in the comments, because it's a strange one, but yeah, I just don't know how to feel. There was one other thing that I wanted to call out, which patron or YouTube member, should I say, Jason flagged up, which I saw had cropped up on Reddit, which is the Carrion Crawler. Now, I feel like they've made a bit of a boo-boo here, because the Paralyzing Tentacles attack is a dexterity saving throw. DC 12 on that one creature. And if they fail, the target is poisoned. And then, this is the interesting bit, it gets to repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on itself on a success. However, there's a bit of a problem here. Oh, hang on. No. Hang on. There's a little bit here. This is the important bit. So whilst the target is poisoned, the target is paralyzed. Now, there's a big problem here because whilst you have the paralyzed condition, you automatically fail dexterity saving throws, which you'd be repeating at the end of each of your turns, ending the effect on a success. And when I first saw this, I thought, okay, yeah, but specific trumps general in D&D. So if there is a rule and then a specific ability overrides that rule, or contradicts that rule, the specific ability trumps. So let's say, for example, an ability. So generally, people can't see in the dark, but dark vision means that you can see in the dark. So if you have dark vision, you can see in the dark. That's a very general example. So in this instance, at first I thought, well, the ability says that you get to repeat the saving throw at the end of each of your turns. So it's a moot point. Except it says you get to repeat the saving throw, but it doesn't say that you get to succeed on the saving throw. If you repeat the saving throw, you're still going to automatically fail because you're paralyzed. So I think this is one of those things where there should be a Constitution save in here somewhere, and I think somebody didn't think this through properly over at Wizards of the Coast. I'll just zoom in for you there so you can see. Yeah, I think somebody didn't think this through properly because rules as written, this simply doesn't work. I mean, it works up to the point that you get poisoned, but then you're guaranteed to be poisoned for a minute at that point because mechanically you're kind of in a vicious cycle that you can't get out of. So it'll be interesting to see how they change this in the errata. Obviously, rules as intended is that you're going to get to repeat the save at the end of each of your turns. But this is going to be one of those things that DMs are going to have to house rule somehow. Whether it be that you're paralyzed except for the thing about automatically failing. I don't really know how you would house rule it. I would probably house rule it personally as the repeated saving throw is a Constitution save rather than a Dex save, because the paralyzed condition doesn't affect Constitution saves. That's probably how I'd house rule it, but this is going to have to be house ruled because there's just a problem with it from day one, which is a shame, really. It's disappointing that's gone to print and nobody noticed it. But there we are. Designing games is not easy. It does require a fair bit of skill and knowledge and stuff. So I'm not going to give them too much shit for it, but it is a shame that it's gone to print, because this will be in your physical copies of the Monster Manual. They can change it on the D&D Beyond website, but in your physical Monster Manual, this is what you're going to have. And for all of the time and effort and marketing that they've put into these Monster Manuals, we shouldn't be seeing these sorts of mistakes. Really, Hasbro, I'm afraid to say. But there we are. Again, I'm not going to give them too much shit for it. My. We've been going for an hour. I wanted to be done with this after 20 minutes. So I'm going to wrap that up there with the look at the Monster Manual this week. But yes, it's out now for Master Tier subscribers on D&D Beyond that pre-ordered it. Player or Heroic Tier, I think they're called, subscribers on D&D Beyond will get it next Tuesday, and then it's on public release the Tuesday after, if you haven't pre-ordered. So yes, it'll be interesting to see what the general consensus is. My general view, and I want to kind of do a segment maybe next week on my general thoughts on the 2024 rules now that we've got them in their entirety. But my general feeling with the Monster Manual is the one thing I didn't say actually. The lore has been dramatically reduced. Like if you look at the lycanthropes, let's take a look at the lycanthropes. So, werewolf. If you take a look at the lycanthropes entry in the monster manual, you've got half a page of lore on lycanthropes generally, and then you have on werewolves, you have 2 paragraphs. This is what you get for the werewolf in 2024. Likewise, and this is the one I noticed it on the most, was the bugbear. Like, if you go to the bugbear entry in the monster manual of 2014, the bugbear, still not a huge entry, but the bugbear is easily a quarter of a page in the 2024 monster manual, which talks about a general overview of them, the fact that they're goblinoids, who they worship, and what their approach to combat and things is. So it's an easy quarter of a page. This is what you get for a bugbear in the 2024 monster manual. To me, the lore is the good bit. The lore is the bit that drew me to the game, not the mechanics. I mean, yes, we all knew that something was going to have to give, because they were throwing in more monsters, they're throwing in more art, like something was going to have to give to keep the page count down and stop it blowing up into a ridiculous thing. But the extreme degree to which they have cut lore out, I find really disappointing, personally. I love my lore, and I can get, like, reading a quarter of a page about a bugbear, I feel like I can get a lot out of that to be like, okay, great. I've got all these story hooks and stuff just built into the lore that I can use. This, I get bugbears embody fear of the wilds and the menace of natural places. They're notoriously stealthy, and foes that venture into their territories often vanish without a trace. So basically, if you go down to the woods today, you're sure for a big surprise. Is basically what the lore says. As opposed to, bugbears worship Hrugrek, a lesser god who dwells on the plane of Acheron. In the absence of their goblinoid kin, bugbears form loose warbands, each one led by its fiercest member. Bugbears believe that when they die, their spirits have a chance to fight at Hugrek's side. They try to prove themselves worthy by defeating as many foes as possible. That's just one paragraph of the lore quality that you get in the 2014 monster manual. So that's a real shame, I think, that has now been lost a little bit. However, that being said, from the mechanical side of things, do I think this monster manual is good? Heck yes, I do. Generally speaking, the mechanics are so much better. Every monster feels like it's more unique. Every monster feels like it has an identity and a purpose. I like the fact that things like the wolf attack, where it attacks you or automatically prone rather than giving you an additional saving throw, is going to make the game harder. The monsters feel like they're going to be easier to run at the table with more dynamic effects and things to keep things moving on the battlefield. Like, I feel like this is going to feel really good, and generally on a mechanical level, much of this is what I hoped for. There are some things I'm disappointed by, such as taking the silver stuff away, silvered weapon immunities, or rather the non-silvered weapon immunities away from things like werewolves and stuff is a disappointing change. Some of the nerfs to some things, like dragons' constitution saves, are a shame. But I think, generally speaking, the things I like outweigh the things I dislike, on the whole. So yeah. All in all, a big good change to the monster manual, to say the least. I'm very happy with it. I think it's going to be a very good. It's going to feel very good in play, which I'm keen to see. As I run more games, I'm keen to see how this is going to feel. But I'm very hopeful at the present time as to what we're looking at. So that is a glimpse, an early access look, if you will, at the 2024 Monster Manual. So I've got a lot to get through on this here insight check. I keep trying to get this show down to an hour every week, but it's not happening. So let's see where we fall on questions this week from those that you have submitted. So thank you very much for everybody that does. As a reminder, there is a new suggestions box post for you to submit your questions for future episodes. So let's get into it. So question 19. Okay. From Robert, how do you prep NPCs? Do you have major ones with detailed backstory or just rough notes and let them develop as game plays out, or a bit of both? Any favourite NPCs from games past? Generally, I mean, it's a bit of a difficult question for me to answer in a way that's going to provide you value, because I do have a little bit of an advantage over a lot of people that play the game in that I am a trained actor, a trained performer. I've been trained in improv. I've been trained in character archetypes. I've been trained in physicalities and vocal tone and accents and all of that stuff. And I kind of have almost a general repertoire of characters that I can pull from if I need to, like caricature type characters that I can just pull off the shelf when I need to really, really quickly. So in that regard, it'd be unfair for me to kind of give you my process, because a lot of it is off the cuff, but that's because of my training. But one thing that I do is I really try and focus on what it is that the character, the NPC, wants in an individual scene. Which is why I think sometimes, and again, I think this is not necessarily a good thing. I mean, it challenges the players, certainly. But it feels like sometimes it's why some of my NPCs can come across as a bit grouchy with the player characters, because I've definitely seen it many times where players will be like, they're coming into the scene, they want their thing, and they go, "Hey NPC, I want this thing." The NPC's like, "Well, I'm not just going to give you the thing," because the NPC's got its own wants and needs. And I've done a lot of improvisation and a lot of work. In fact, I've written a whole show on the basis of setting up scenes with characters. And the scene is improvised and played out based on what those two different characters want and where the conflict comes from. And in many ways, it then becomes a battle of wills between those two characters, where who is the one that's going to get what they want and who's the one that's not going to manage to get it. So that's kind of how I play my NPCs, which sometimes can be very standoffish. But that's generally the main thing that I focus on, is what is it that an NPC wants in that particular scene. It could be as simple as a group comes into the shop, they want a discount, the shopkeeper wants to make as much money as possible. So how is that going to play out? Who is going to win the battle of wills? The PC is going to be able to convince the shopkeeper that they are rightfully deserving of a discount, and actually giving them a discount might mean repeat business later, for example. Or is the shopkeeper just unwilling to give up their potential profit, for example? Or it could be about a toll on the road from a band of orcs. Maybe the orcs don't really want the money. Maybe the orcs are more gunning for the fight, for example. And so the party refusing to give the money actually plays into their hands quite nicely, because they'd rather take the fight. So that's something that I do definitely prepare. But aside from that, if a character then becomes important, that's when I'll start to flesh things out a little bit more. I mean, generally, for the key NPCs, those are things that will be fleshed out. I'll certainly think about what we call in the acting world the super objective of the character. Like, what is the character trying to achieve in this campaign or this adventure? and then the kind of objective, which is what does the character want in this particular scene. So generally the big main NPCs will be given a super objective and an objective. Your general NPCs will just be given a base objective. And then if they become important because the characters really like them, that's when that character will be fleshed out, perhaps with a backstory and a super objective and things like that. So I hope that was helpful. Good question, Robert. Very good question indeed. Next question. Again from Robert. How do you make sense motive type checks interesting? So obviously, we're referring to like insight checks in D&D, but sense motive, certainly being a term from previous editions. How do I make them interesting? Well, I one thing that I am really particular of with insight checks is insight checks are not a lie detector. Well, no, it's not a lie detector. It's that they're not mind reading. I really am quite strict on don't assume that I'm going to give you the answer. You're going to know whether they're lying necessarily. But I can give you a hint as to what you can suggest or infer from their demeanor. So they might perhaps look a little bit uncomfortable by the line of questioning for whatever reason. They might look guilty about something. But I'm not going to give too much information with an insight check. I like to basically my insight check is my give me a hint roll. And if you roll, the higher you roll, the better the hint will be. Generally, if you roll below 10 total, you're probably not going to get anything at all. But from 10 up until 30, the higher you roll, the stronger your hint's going to be. And that's kind of how I do it. It's just like, and I'll do it not just for social stuff either. Like sometimes if the characters are stuck and can't work something out, I'll give them an insight check. Or even, this is another thing that I do, which I don't know if some people probably won't like, but if the player characters, or the players more specifically, have forgotten a detail, or even if, in fact, not necessarily forgotten, but more likely something was mentioned in passing and they didn't pick up on it. This happens all the time. Like you're describing something and they just don't pick up on that particular detail. That's where I will go, okay, well, you missed that detail, but give me an insight check. And if they roll high enough, I'll say, so don't forget this, basically. So that's something that I like to do. I don't know if that necessarily answers your question about keeping them interesting, though. Because I think keeping them interesting is very much situational. So I don't know if I can give you an answer on that generally. But certainly on a general level, that's how I like to use them. Let's do one more here. So from Nigel. Give me a sec. From Nigel. Have you ever changed your lore or backstory behind the scenes due to something a player character said or done, which made you think it would be so much better if this were the case, rather than the current undiscovered lore or background? And then Nigel calls me out here very specifically. E.g., running Lost Mines, and you thought you knew who the Black Spider was, until Saga decided to do some fighting in Neverwinter, and Halfdan Loren was born into the campaign. Well, I couldn't possibly comment about Black Spider. One thing I will say is I do enjoy, one of the joys of being a Dungeon Master is I do like a little bit of misdirection. That's all I'm going to say on that. But to answer your question directly, have I ever changed lore or backstory behind the scenes due to something that's been said or done by a player character because it would be better? Yes. I don't do it so much now, actually. Mainly because I have more time to come up with misdirects and things like that. It's certainly something I used to do when I was really first starting out, when I was doing my homebrew thing and going, I've got this idea, and then one of the player characters would go, "Oh, what if it's this?" And I'd go, "Oh shit, that's totally better than the idea I'd had." Change, and then kind of move it about a little bit to put my own spin on it, so it's close but not quite, and things like that. That's definitely something I have done in the past. But as I say, not so much these days as I used to. Yeah, not so much as I used to. But either way, I will reiterate, I do love a bit of misdirection as a dungeon master. It's one thing I love about a lot of bluff games. I've told told this story many times. I once played a game of poker with somebody who was really. It was one of those kind of situations where somebody was kind of trying to be a bit of an alpha and kind of saying to me, "Oh, you reckon you're really good at poker, don't you?" And I'm like, I mean, I like my games of bluff. I like games of deception and things like that. I find them fun because I'm a bit mischievous by nature. But I don't necessarily think I'm an ace at poker. And he said, "Well, I'll beat you. I'll beat you. I'll beat you." I went, "Well, listen. Here's how I'm gonna beat you." And I told him my entire strategy. And basically, I said to him, I'm gonna misdirect you so much that by the end of it, you're not gonna know whether I'm bluffing or not. Like, you're just gonna be so all over the place that there's gonna be no point you looking for any tells or anything, because it's gonna be so smoke screened. And I wiped the floor with him. Even though he knew my strategy, because I just, again, I'm a bit mischievous by nature, so I like games of misdirection and things like that. So, yes, and that's why I enjoy being a DM, because you kind of get to do that as well, with the players. Moo ha 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 ha. All right. So, thank you for those that have submitted questions. Don't forget to you can either leave questions below this video, or indeed in the suggestions box post that I've put up. Either is fine. And yes, thank you for submitting the questions for those of you that did. So, ooh, that's gone wrong again. Where's my orc video? There we are. Okie doke. So today we're going to take a look at role-playing an orc as we continue the series of videos on role-playing tips for the different species and making them stand out in your games so that they feel a little bit different from just being another type of human, which I think is more and more important in these versions of the game, the 2024 rules, where like ability scores and stuff are not necessarily tied to your character and things. So bringing that role play element, I think, is really helpful. So what does the player's handbook tell us about the orc, first of all? Well, one, they trace their origins to Grumsh, a powerful god of the material plane. Now, what the player's handbook doesn't tell us is that Grumsh is a chaotic evil god of tempest and war, known for his unyielding will and destructive power. That's not included in the 2024 Player's Handbook, but I think the context is important, so I've added it here. Now, Grumsh gave orcs gifts to help them survive and explore vast landscapes, from plains and caverns to oceans and things like that. And the abilities that Grumsh gave them were endurance, in order to keep going despite any hardship, determination, a relentless drive to achieve their goals, and dark vision, the ability to see in the dark to aid in their survival. And they maintain and retain these blessings even if they worship other gods, which is something that the Player's Handbook specifically calls out. Generally, physically, they tend to be tall and quite broad in stature, with grey skin, pointed ears, and tusk-like lower canines. Some orcs grow up with stories of their ancestors' great journeys and deeds, and those stories often lead many to wonder if they too will be called to greatness by the almighty Grumsh. Others, however, choose to leave old traditions behind and carve out their own destinies by differentiating themselves from their kins past, perhaps. So that's all well and good in terms of the lore, but how are these things represented mechanically? Well, as a creature type, they are humanoid, as are... Oh, that says gnome. That was my my old... for my template. It should say orc traits. They are considered humanoid. This is orcs, not gnomes. They're considered humanoid and medium in size, standing at about 6 to 7 feet tall with a speed of 30 feet. So they're fairly standard in terms of their physicality when it comes to comparing other species within the 2024 Player's Handbook. You gain Adrenaline Rush, which allows you to take the dash action as a bonus action, and doing so, giving yourself a number of temporary hit points equal to your proficiency bonus. You can use this trait a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, which at level 1 will be 2 times, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a short or long rest. This is a really cool feature, which allows you to move about the battlefield quicker than others, at least temporarily, even if you're not a rogue or anything like that, or a monk perhaps. You gain Dark Vision up to a range of 120 feet, which puts you at the higher echelon of Dark Vision. I think only Dwarves and Drow have 120 feet Dark Vision, so highly gifted indeed in that regard. And you have Relentless Endurance, so when you're reduced to 0 hit points but aren't killed outright, you drop to 1 hit point instead, which just gives you a little bit of an extra opportunity to try and win the day. And once you use that trait, you can't do so again until you finish a long rest. So there's only so many times that you can get up, or rather specifically, only one time you can stay standing. So now we get to my favourite bit of these roleplay tips videos, which are the questions that you can ask yourself to really bring the lore of the character out to the front of the session, if it were, as it were, to really make your character stand out a little bit more. So there are 10 questions that I've put together for you to ask yourself to really try and link your character to the lore of orcs. So what is your connection to Grumsh, this chaotic evil god of tempest and war? Do you revere him? Do you reject his teachings? Or do you feel a little bit indifferent? And ultimately, how does his legacy of violence influence the choices that you make as an orc? How do you view your endurance and determination that you are gifted by Grumsh? Do you see them as gifts, or do you think that they are more burdens from your god of creation, or simply just a part of who you are? What role does strength play in your life? Do you believe that might makes right, that kind of almost Klingon-esque warrior culture that orcs will certainly be known for? Or do you value other qualities alongside physical power? Again, and with a lot of these questions that I've put together, many of them kind of look at different angles from which you as an orc player get to choose whether or not you lean into that kind of dark side of orcs that they have been known for throughout all previous editions of the game, versus kind of breaking free and rejecting those ideas. So you'll see a theme in relation to that. And this is another one about that physicality. Is that as important to you as it is to, say, other orcs? And how do you feel about your ancestors' great journeys and deeds? Are you inspired to prove yourself, or do you prefer to forge your own path? Again, these stories of these orcs that may have done potentially great things, or potentially even dastardly things that your culture might see as great, because they're in the name of Grumsh, this evil god of war and conquest. Do you feel that same draw to those sorts of deeds, or is this something that you would rather reject and find your own way? What drives you to keep pushing forward? Are you seeking personal glory? Perhaps vengeance? Are you looking to find belonging in another society? Or perhaps something else entirely? What's your kind of goal, ultimately? How do others perceive you, and how do you respond? Are you feared, respected, or misunderstood because of your orcish heritage? Now, this is one that's a bit of a tricky one that I would advise talking to your dungeon master about, and talking to your dungeon master about how are orcs perceived. Ask what they think, and feel free, I think, to have a very adult conversation with your DM about where you think orcs should sit. And this is also one of those things that, if you're at the right table and it has buy-in from other players, this is an opportunity for you to explore the perception of orcs. Or if you're and this is probably one really that, I mean, definitely checking with your DM, because they might have a bit of a pulse on what your players are willing to explore at the table versus what they're not willing to explore at the table. So they might have a good pulse on it. And if they don't, they might ask your fellow players directly if some of these things are themes that they would like to explore at the table, and see what your dungeon master says. But ultimately, that is a conversation for you and your dungeon master to have with each other, and potentially also the other players as well, to make sure that there's buy-in from everybody with a lot of those themes. How do you view battle? Here, let me try that again. How do you view battle and conflict? Do you embrace combat as a way of life, or do you fight only when necessary? Again, coming back to this theme of the duality of being an orc. Do you lean into the kind of warmongering orcish culture that is led by Grumsh, or is this something that you're going to reject and try and find other ways of living life? What's your relationship with other orcs? Do you have strong ties to your kin, or have you distanced yourself from orcish traditions? Again, and just another angle to consider as to whether or not you're going to lean into the orcs of old or forge your own path. How do you approach challenges and adversity? Do you charge in headfirst, strategize carefully, or use sheer willpower to push through? Charging in headfirst feels very orcish. Using your willpower to push through feels very orcish. Or do you take the strategic approach, which to me feels less orcish, but just as much as these tropes exist, they exist there for you to either lean in or to try and break free from. And those things, even just that on itself, if you follow kind of the more traditional orc views of things in terms of the warmongering and things like that Grumsh has bestowed upon the orcs, maybe this is where you differentiate yourself. You don't have to differentiate yourself from all of these things. Maybe this is the particular one where actually, whilst you are keen for war and keen to prove yourself in battle, perhaps you're not willing to charge in head first without having formed a plan first. And that will feel quite jarring compared to the rest of the character, for example. What does freedom mean to you? Do you seek to roam the world like your ancestors, or are you looking for a place to settle? Orcs are depicted in the 2024 Player's Handbook as being slightly nomadic, so this one kind of asks that question very directly. So those are my 10 questions for if you're playing an orc, and how you can try and differentiate your orc from perhaps some of the other species in the game and some of the other player characters at the table. I will have put together a worksheet that you should be able to download from a link down below for free from the Patreon, from our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/BardicQuest. If you download that, you can print that worksheet out, scribble on it, and come up with your answers, so you've got it on physical if you want to, or indeed take notes as we're going through this video. But I hope you really found that helpful. I'm really enjoying kind of these videos and giving you guys food for thought on how you can differentiate your characters a little bit. So I hope you found it helpful. If you did, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. But that is it from me. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. So, thank you, patrons and YouTube members, for tuning in to this episode of Insight Check. I really hope you found it useful, particularly that hour-long deep dive on some of the bits of the Monster Manual. I hope that was really helpful for you as well, to kind of get a glimpse of what you can expect. Maybe that has made you decide whether or not you want to invest in a copy of the Monster Manual yourself or not. Thank you for everybody who submitted questions. I really enjoy answering those questions every week, so keep them coming. Again, there is a suggestions box post for you to do that, or indeed you can just leave a comment at the bottom of this video and I'll add that to my list of questions. And for those of you who have considered playing an orc, I hope those roleplay questions for you have also been a helpful food for thought for you. So I hope you have yourselves a lovely weekend. Again, we got a new episode of Bardic Quest coming into early access later tonight. It is called, what was it? Madness in the Shadowfell. So I'm looking forward to seeing that episode. And let's see, the next episode after that, depending on how things go on Sunday with our recording session, could very well be the last. So we will see. Subject to change, of course, depending on what happens. But yes, the finale is fast approaching, and it's an exciting time, but equally a bittersweet one. So have yourselves a lovely weekend. Thank you for tuning in, everyone, and I will catch you all next week.